final piece of news before we head off to shoutouts callouts is some Crunchyroll stuff. So, Crunchyroll, uh, earlier this, earlier this month, August 9th, sorry, not August, what am I saying? October 9th. So, announced that Sony Pictures Entertainment and Crunchyroll reached a settlement on September 15th in a class action lawsuit between them and Salvador Bertrand Jr., Ellie Gross, and others, making Crunchyroll users in the United States eligible for payment of approximately 30 US dollars. Blah blah. Must eligible users must submit a claim form. Blah blah. The class action lawsuit alleged that Crunchyroll violated the United States Video Privacy Protection Act by disclosing subscribers' personally identifiable information (PII), Facebook and other third-party companies. Sony Pictures Entertainment and Crunchyroll deny the claim, but have decided to settle, quote unquote, to avoid the uncertainties and expenses associated with continuing the case.
Okay.
Beltran and the others filed a class action lawsuit in the district court for the Northern District of Illinois in September 2022. So, this means that they did it, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like this means that they did it, but legally you can't say that they did it.
yeah, and also right afterwards, they all like after they announced that they were, giving up and paying out for the class action lawsuit, they announced that it is collaborating with Sony Pictures Entertainment to launch a new 24/7 linear channel on like various streaming platforms, as well as they also entered a merchandising partnership with Black White Orange in India to sell more stuff, such as Psalm 100, Trigun, Pistol, stuff like that. And so, like, again, I just want to say the one like part where I don't want to be humble about our podcast is that we have been a strong opponent of Crunchyroll doing things in the field for since the creation of the podcast. We have been proudly so, despite so many people saying stupid shit like, "Oh, you should be grateful that they're stepping into the localization scene," or whatever it is. Despite the fact that, or like, "Oh, don't they have shitty subs, but at least they're doing it in the official localization," or whatever the fucking other bullshit that they had over the all these like Crunchyroll fans and justifiers had over the years. Despite the fact that you knew these guys were bad from the start. Do you know why? Because and I talked about this with Dark, uh, you know, um, outside of the podcast, but just the fact that when Crunchyroll started, they had a very shitty player, and like overall, their localization service was shitty. Their video player was shitty. Obviously, their subs were middling at best, and usually at that time when they were barging into the scene, the fan subs, for the most part, were higher quality than the official subs. So you had all these problems. And then what did they do as they grew bigger? By the way, they were a joke from the beginning. They were essentially a joke until I want to say like a couple years back, right? Even a couple years back, you still had studio interviews where they were just like, "Yeah, Crunchyroll was in these like at these like networking events, but we just laughed them out of the room and stuff like that. Like we thought they were a joke." Um, so what did they do as they grew bigger in their initial days? Did they improve the localization service? Did they improve their website? Did they improve their player? What did they do to provide a better version of the core service? The answer is they didn't do any of that. They started expanding. They did created like different departments to try to sell like their merchandise and try to increase their licensing networking, and to just do stupid fucking PR marketing stunts like Crunchyroll, like conventions or whatever the fuck, or like doing that. What is it that making that new cafeteria or whatever that looked like a fucking steel playground?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did a
And
really shitty cafeteria.
yeah,
They did the
while still
Crunchyroll
not.
like convention
Yeah,
stuff. They did the Crunchyroll like they tried to make the Crunchyroll like awards a like production or whatever when it's
yeah, yeah,
like
Yeah,
yeah,
like the
yeah, yeah,
Game
just
yeah.
make a
Awards. It's like
fucking blog post, dumbass.
And
Like
also remember, all of the company news that we saw, like you know how we always cover like news throughout the years of like Crunchyroll is expanding in these like various capabilities. Whenever they're creating like doing like they were doing expansions, it was always like creating new offices or like doing like other side efforts, like trying to sell merchandise or whatever it is. It was never about making their localization service better, which is their core service. The reason why Crunchyroll exists, the reason why Crunchyroll like people even turn towards them is because they have that service in the first place. And so
yeah,
I
and
knew
now
from the
we've
start.
we've
Yeah.
seen we've seen where it leads now with the subs for fucking what's it called, which I haven't seen if they've fixed those yet.
Yeah,
By
did
even
they do
episode
like machine
2.
translator or like some really shitty like
yes,
Yuzuki-san,
they
yeah,
standard?
they
Yuzuki-san's
they
was
did a
definitely
they
machine
did
translated. Like,
100% machine translation, and they got called out on it, and they took it down.
Yeah. And they were like, sorry, we had some unsatisfactory quality. It's like, no, it's not just
yeah, no,
unsatisfactory
you
quality.
haven't
You
had,
guys
yeah, it's
literally
like
just
you
tried to cut out the
literally,
middleman.
yeah,
Yeah, they
you
just
fucking
they shit
machine
that out onto their
translated. Like,
site because
what?
they thought nobody was gonna watch that shit. Like,
Yeah, or like people were just gonna like scoop up that slop or whatever it is.
yeah,
And it would be one thing if like you had at least a
I mean,
like machine
it's
translation
either
into
that
QA.
or it's a fucking, what's it called? Or it's like a what's it called, like freelancer like not getting their shit in on time and they just fucking threw it into a machine translation and was like,
Yeah.
whatever, like I'm just gonna do that, which is still bad on their part because it's like, yeah, okay, you should be
yeah. I mean,
having
You
that
don't
people
still
have a
like
went.
QA
check
or
these
editor.
subs.
That
That
clear
Yeah,
they
yeah.
clearly went through an editor, right? Which means your
Yeah.
editor doesn't give a shit.
But the
So
problem
And
was,
and QA.
didn't
Editor and
didn't
QA
other
are should
didn't
be two
other
separate roles.
regions
Yeah.
have correct subtitles at the same time?
I have no idea.
I don't know.
I don't know,
I read
yeah, I
that
didn't see
I
that.
read
I
that
mean
other regions had correct subtitles at the same time. So what's happening there?
I mean, I
I
Yeah.
mean
would
what's happening
imagine
there then
like
is that's
that.
again
I
our
imagine
English
those are probably,
translators
yeah, probably
translating.
handled by different people.
But yeah, it's just so evident that they do not care about their core service and the service that actually provides the the brunt, if
The
not pretty much all
product,
of the value, yeah, to their viewers. And now we're
Yeah,
at
I
this
mean
point where
it is
Crunchy,
literally all
yeah,
of the value because like
yeah, yeah, exactly,
without it,
because you're not doing
Crunchyroll is
Crunchyroll for
gone.
Crunchyroll Con,
Like,
yeah.
right, yeah, like you can get rid of Crunchyroll Con. You can get rid of your shitty cafeteria. Like you could just have a regular cafeteria. You could get rid of like all of like your merch. You can get rid of your fucking VTuber attempt. Like
Yeah.
you don't need those things to stay afloat. You if you get rid
Mhm.
of like the media player or the fucking subtitles or the like just streaming service in general, then you're gone. Like no one's here for anything else.
And the most frustrating thing is now, like before, we could have choked out Crunchyroll in its sleep when it didn't have as much power and just, tried to find a different company. But now that Crunchyroll is not only stronger, like has significant sway, but is essentially the only dog on the market because of the merger
I mean,
with
is
Funimation.
yeah, it's more or less a monopoly
Yeah,
because
and it's
it's
under Sony Anime Pictures after it got bought from
yeah,
away from Warner
it's
Pictures.
and it's the
So
only it's importantly like the only anime exclusive streaming service.
yeah,
Like it's not
and
like you can't say like Netflix and shit because like first of all like that's already showing its cracks for one, but
yeah,
two, like, it's not the exclusively anime streaming service, which means like when they're cutting license deals and shit, like that changes a lot. That changes a lot about
yeah,
like notoriety for the companies going to try and license out things. Like
I think
yeah,
I think High Dive is anime exclusive, but they're a much smaller player. So
yeah, and also like let's say third like some brave souls who exited Crunchyroll or had experience in this sort of general management, license management and localization industry came together and tried to create like a more honest company, right? That already is like a pipe dream, but let's say they did, right? Currently, Crunchyroll is under Sony Pictures Entertainment. Do you guys honestly believe that at this point, if a new like licensing or localization place comes, that Sony Pictures will not do their damnedest to just wipe out, just nuke from the surface of the planet whatever other like service that tries to come near?
Oh
Like,
yeah,
of
I mean,
course,
I
listen,
wouldn't
it's like
be surprised if they're already like wheel and deal to try and like
yeah, they will absolutely
prevent
strong arm
companies
like the studios.
from.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, they
working with them.
probably already try and prevent studios from like going to Netflix and shit.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
being like,
exactly.
hey, if you like go to Netflix or Hulu once, then we're not taking any of your properties or
Yeah.
something like that.
And
Like,
Sony Pictures Entertainment is the major controlling influence in terms of like this media in Japan. And guess what? A lot of Japanese studios are in Japan, like in the smack dab, like in the middle of, in Tokyo or Osaka or like in these like major metropolitan places. And essentially under the thumb of Sony Pictures. So, you know, uh, it's just such a shitty situation. And as much as it is obviously corporate greed that led this way, I think it's also a big part on you know the weeb culture, the anime culture in the west that also led us here, being so complacent and being like, yeah, of course it's okay for any Crunchyroll to do anything, just fuck us in the ass or do whatever it is, as long as we can get our mediocre localized anime out. Uh, And I think, this culture has unfortunately led over the years to this not only decline in quality, but in a situation where we now really can't do anything about it. And it is just so disappointing to be in this situation and just have to watch. Now we just have to watch Crunchyroll unless like they literally survived a class action lawsuit on a privacy notice and they're expanding. They are literally expanding. They're just like, yeah, whatever, bro. Like we stole your data.
yeah, I
We'll
mean,
give each of you guys $30. Like,
Yeah, you
okay.
get
we
$30
literally are
now.
just like waiting now. Like that's about it.
Yeah.
We just have to
Yeah.
wait for them
Unless they
to
yeah.
die essentially because I
Yeah.
mean they are like they will. Every streaming service will realistically.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I don't think any streaming service is actually ever going to last. Like they've been around for a while, but I think the cracks that you see with like Netflix and the cracks you see with like even the early stuff you see with even things like Game Pass and stuff like that where it's like, yeah, no, this shit is like just so blatantly unsustainable that it's like irrelevant. Because at some
Yeah.
point, like, the idea like is you get people in for like Crunchyroll or something, and like at first your Crunchyroll subscription is like $7.99 a month, and then it's $8.99, and then it's $11.99, and then it's fucking
Yeah.
$15, and it's $20, and it's like, well, I don't know about you, but like I already like do not pay for like any streaming service at this point. Like people in my
Mm.
family have some of them, but like if there's not like a package deal where you're getting like three different services, like the Disney deal or whatever, where like like Disney Plus, Hulu, and some other shit, and I think, and then like or like Netflix bundles and shit like that, then it's like, yeah, I really don't think people are gonna be out here paying like $30 a month to be watching fucking Crunchyroll for them to be like sustainable in the future or like profitable with their fucking
Mm.
expansions. Like, yeah, I don't think people are going to be willing to pay that, and then I think you're just going to see it fall apart regardless.
Hmm. Yeah, it's just such a pity. I mean, now we just have to watch it. So, well, it's like as late said in chat, like Sony Anime Monopoly in the West soon. It's like
I mean, it's
it's
already
essentially a
there.
duopoly.
Like,
Yeah, I mean, well, it's technically still like a duopoly because half of the licensing or a lot of the licensing is under Warner Bros. From like the far arms, long arms of Warner Bros. Entertainment, and the other sort of half ish is in Sony Pictures. But now Crunchyroll and the general localization anime localization scene has too much momentum now that Crunchyroll got bought out by Sony Pictures, because Crunchyroll has actual power. If Crunchyroll didn't have power, and Sony Pictures just kind of bought it in the early days and was just like, "Do we kind of do want to do localization?" And then like it got dumped on because of various incidents or whatever, it'll be another matter. Now it's just too powerful. It's too powerful, and we'll yeah, we'll see how that pans out. I think Warner Bros. And like Netflix and stuff like that will still have significant market share, but
I mean, they'll have market share, but I think
it's
the
the
problem
problem.
is, like you said, that like Sony is a Japanese known company. It's like this known entity. I think the fact that Crunchyroll again is the other than like High Dive or whatever, like the fact that it's like that big and
Yeah.
the exclusive like anime streamer, I think
Hmm.
that paired up with, the Sony, like the weight of Sony, that's easy to put around like and throw around through, especially like Japan, like on the Japanese side of the business. Like you're
Yeah.
not gonna have them, like you're not really gonna have studios be like, or like even the production, like,
Going
you
against
know,
Sony Pictures
or
image.
licensors be like, oh man, like who are we gonna go with? They're just gonna say like, all
Hmm.
right, we're just gonna like give this to Sony to do with Crunchyroll. Like
Yeah.
they're not gonna be like, all right, who do we go with? Well, what about High Dive, right? Like it's just instantly gonna be Crunchyroll every single time.
Yeah.
I think is what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
At least, and I think it's gonna get worse. Like especially if they can scoop more and more like larger stuff. Like I think that's gonna be a problem, right? Like if whatever is next, whatever the next like quote unquote demon slayer is, like if that shit starts also all going to Crunchyroll, then it's like really over
Hmm.
because I feel like that's really keeping Netflix as like a player in the game at this point where you do
Yeah.
have large stuff like that. But if that also just unequivocally goes there too, then yeah,
Yeah, and also
not gonna
if
be good.
even Netflix is struggling, then it's just like it also sets a precedent where it's just like, or it sets an example rather, where people go, okay, well, like, why would we be able to succeed in this market, or like, why would venture capitalists invest in these other like smaller companies to pop up, right? It's kind of like that.
Yeah, I mean, I would be really shocked
Um,
if like a lot of streamers continue. I'd like to see I mean, a decent like market, like a decent storefront would be nice to see that doesn't
yeah,
upcharge like fucking $1 million for fucking things like that. Like a simul release that you just pay for would be nice to see, but you know,
it's and Crunchyroll just has the economies of scale just working behind them all the time now, because and so it's hard to undercut them in terms of price. Yeah.
oh yeah, I mean
Anyways,
you're not undercutting
yeah,
them. Yeah.
yeah. That's also a huge problem. Yeah, we'll see. It's very disappointing, and we'll see how it kind of unravels in the years to come. But hopefully, it won't be. As always, again, the focus should be on benefiting the viewers of the anime as well as the studios who make the anime. And I hope that pain does not overly befall those two parties. But studio or but publisher executives and these sorts of companies gotta try to scrape all their pennies, right? So we'll see.